Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this very important conversation. As a former classroom teacher and as the current education program officer for the Foundation for the Mid-South, I am extremely excited about this conversation and the information that's about to be brought forth. But before we begin, I want to thank our sponsors, WK Kellogg and Mississippi TRHT, for making today possible. Your commitment and support allow us to bring together educators, community leaders, and advocates to focus on what matters most, our students. Today, we will be diving into some of the most pressing issues in education today: how we prepare teachers, how we meet the growing social and emotional needs of our students, and how we break down barriers so families and communities can be fully engaged in the education process. We're fortunate today to have three outstanding leaders who will bring expertise and passion to these topics. First, we have Dr. Adrienne Hudson, who is the Executive Director of RISE Incorporated, a grassroots organization with boots on the ground combating the teacher shortage crisis in the Mississippi Delta region. Next, we have Dr. Clayton Barksdale, who is the Executive Director of the West Mississippi Education Consortium, a leading educational consulting firm that specializes in social emotional learning, professional development, and student support. Last but not least, we have Dr. Shaquita Wilson Johnson, who is an assistant professor at Mississippi Valley State University and the founder and CEO of the GAP Leadership Program. She works to empower young people through entrepreneurship education, storytelling, and civic leadership initiatives. Thank you all for being a part of this, and thank you all for coming on the platform. So, the first topic I want to get into is teacher certification and preparation. And so I want to bring up Dr. Hudson to lead us in this conversation.
Hi, George. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome, Dr. Hudson. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Great, great. So, Dr. Hudson, there's a phrase that we constantly use in the education world, and that phrase is highly qualified teacher. And then you'll see research that says research consistently shows that having a highly qualified teacher in the classroom is one of the most important factors for student success. So my question to you is, Dr. Hudson, in your view, what does it mean to be a highly qualified teacher today?
So I'll definitely say that my definition of the highly qualified teacher is a little contradictory to what the federal law that we have been governed by and has been passed down for years based on the No Child Left Behind Act. I'm a little bit different than the typical response, especially when I consider Mississippi, which is our home and is also home to 3,000 teacher vacancies right now. So when I listen to the definition under No Child Left Behind, I think that we definitely have to be more creative than get a degree, pass a test, and this is how I'm determining whether someone is highly qualified. For me, I think automatically highly qualified to do what? Right? It's such a huge job, such a big job to ask educators to mold the minds of young people to help to determine not only how well that student is going to perform later in life, but also how well a community is going to thrive or decline based on how those students are performing. And if we consider all of those things, we've got to get past whether or not someone can pass a test with 100 questions and 4 hours to take it, if that's enough to determine whether they are highly qualified to hold such a precious gift in their hands. I think, yes, we do need to make sure that a highly qualified teacher brings in knowledge and also pedagogy. Those are important. But they also have to bring in passion and purpose, persistence, cultural competence. They have to have the discipline to continue to keep learning and to know that this is a consistent and continual battle that they're fighting so that they can hone their skills and really understand the gravity of this role and what that means in the lives of those students that we have and the limitless potential that they hold inside of them. So, research for decades has shown us that teachers and teacher quality are amongst the highest factors in side of a school on whether or not students are going to be successful. So we see that, we believe that that's true. But we also know that an effective teacher can enhance student achievement by at least a grade level in a year. Now, an ineffective teacher has the opposite impact. So we've got to get really conscious of what it means to be a highly qualified teacher in our eyes, because there are many people who can pass a test and they have the content knowledge for themselves. But the art of teaching is imparting that knowledge to students. And when we start looking at the impact, we go to, let's look at economist Raj Shetty. One of his research pieces talked about how a strong teacher raises a classroom's lifetime earning expectancy by about $250,000 per classroom, and also increases the rate at which those students are likely to attend college. So we're talking about that level of impact. That's a lot of impact, and we need to make sure that the individuals that we're giving this gift to lay the foundation for learning and also propel those students' lives forward, that is more than just about a test score or more than just about the degrees that they have, but do they also have a passionate educator who's committed to going beyond the textbook to get life-changing results for students? That's a highly qualified teacher to me.
I love that. I love that. And so with that being said, how does teacher certification and preparation impact student learning outcome, especially in our underserved communities?
Oh, wow. Okay. So that is such a big one. Number one, certification and preparation is going to open the doors to whether people can even enter the profession. So we've got to be very cognizant of what are we putting inside of our students while they're in college and preparing for the classroom. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that many of our educators are not going into the traditional route of education. So if I'm going through an alternate route, I may only take 3 classes as an educator. I may only use the degree that I have and use that information to help me to get my alternate certification. So we've got to offer as many opportunities as possible once people get inside of the classroom so that they can continue to become as prepared as possible. So they've got to be able to hone their skills, and we've got to look at what do we do when we don't have people in those seats? Because what's happening is a lot of times we're, because we need somebody, we are grabbing individuals who aren't prepared, and then we're forgetting to pour into them the other ingredients so that they have the pedagogy, have the skills to combine with that passion and desire so that they can be the best educators. So we see as a state that our new teacher license issuance has gone down by about 50%. In Congressional District 2, where I live and where my child goes to school as well, here in the heart of the Delta, let's look at 2018. We had about 500 teacher vacancies. Then in just 5 years, we saw that that was reported as that number doubled to over 1,000 teacher vacancies. So there's a serious issue around filling those gaps. And because we know that, we've got to put things in place so that if we are inviting other people into the profession as an alternate profession, because there are plenty of people who can do an excellent job who did not go the traditional route, we've still got to put a plan in place to help them to be the best that they can be. And so here in the Delta, research has shown us that you have about 114 times, you're more likely to have a teacher shortage faced in the Delta region, 114 times more likely than other parts of our state. So we know that it's a dire situation, and we are going to have some people inside of our classrooms who did not possibly follow that traditional route. But That means that we have to come up with some creative ways to ensure that the individuals teaching are able to be as prepared as possible. And I think that is where we as a team, we as a collective, a community, the institutions of higher learning, the MDE, all of us need to come together and figure out what are the ways that we can work together to make sure that our students are prepared and that there are individuals in front of them that are prepared to prepare them for the future they deserve.
Awesome. That alternate, I mean, that plan of having a plan in place is extremely important. I was an alternate route educator myself, so I definitely know how important having a plan in place is. Let's talk about strategy very quickly. Dr. Hudson, what are some strategies that schools and districts can use to ensure that all students, regardless of zip code, have access to a certified, well-prepared teachers?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear your question is intentionality. So often we start to talk about the teacher shortage and we talk about the problem, and then it becomes overwhelming because it is such a big problem and it is getting larger. A lot of times we are missing that intentionality because it's overwhelming. We have to realize this problem is not going to be fixed overnight. The teacher shortage started when I was in high school. So we're talking 20 years ago that we've been dealing with this particular problem. So if we want to be serious about closing those gaps, we've got to have all hands on deck. And that means not just recruiting and retaining, but also cultivating the teachers that we want to see. We believe at Rise that grow your own is the method, that's a powerful way for us to get individuals who maybe haven't even considered the teaching profession to learn about the profession. Let's try to remove some of the myths and the stereotypes around teaching and focus on the positives that are out there, because there are so many positives to this profession. And I think there are many people who would go into a classroom and have marvelous results for students, but they are being persuaded or dissuaded to even enter the profession before they have a chance. And that means that we, as school leaders, as community leaders, as parents, we have a role to play. We have to get all hands on deck where the community, parents, members of the teaching profession, young people who may be interested in teaching, that they all feel welcome to be a part of this work. It is such a dire need, and everything that we're doing inside of schools is going to impact where we want to go as communities, as a state, as a region. Is going to be so important for us to get all hands on deck. So when we start talking about legislators, what are we doing? What are we putting in place that can get fair salaries inside of our classroom, get the supplies and instructional resources to the students and to the teachers, and make sure that it's not something that's very complicated. Support doesn't have to be complicated. We could do housing vouchers. Those were available when I started as a teacher. Tuition help, tuition reimbursement. Even looking at when I was in school, I did not have to pay for an undergraduate degree. There were programs that covered the entire cost, and those programs are no longer available at those rates. What can we do to reestablish those things, especially in places that have severe teacher shortages? Additionally, as a community, can we offer local discounts? Here in Coleman County, we started a campaign called the Big Apple Campaign, where we are asking local businesses to offer a free drink with a meal. Let the teachers know that we support the work that they're doing. And so that will have a ripple effect that can impact students, families, and communities for generations to come. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Dr. Hudson. All right. Thank you for your viewpoints on why it's important to have highly qualified teachers. Next up, I want to talk about social emotional needs of our students. And so I'm going to bring up Dr. Barksdale to lead us in that conversation.
Hey, how
Dr.
you
Barksdale,
doing?
how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. How you doing, sir? How you doing?
Awesome, awesome.
There you
My
go.
first question for you, Dr. Barksdale.
Mhm.
How can schools better equip educators to manage the growing social emotional needs of our students, especially after the pandemic? And I want you to be as succinct as you possibly can on that.
Yes, sir. Well, that's a really, really great question. And again, thanks for having me on. I appreciate this chance to speak about SEL and the importance of SEL in our schools. But to answer your question, everything must flow from the top down. So that means that in order for a school system to embrace SEL, it must be, a push from the central office, to embrace it. So everything must come from the central office and then flow downward to the schools and then to the classrooms. So that would be the main point. And when I was an admin and principal, what I did was, we all celebrate the birthdays and holidays and Christmas and Thanksgiving and everything. That's good. But in order to really, bring in SEL, the social and emotional side of learning, you need to learn about your faculty and your staff and your students. For an example, every year, we have, certain days that we celebrate or bring attention to us. They kind of weigh heavy on us. Like for an example, a really good teacher of mine, her grandmother passed on January the 10th. And every year during that time period, she just went into a mode of depression. So what I did was I went around the school and I collected all these days where something traumatic happened to them in their lives. And when that day came up, when they came to celebrate the, anniversary, what I did was I gave them a card, or thank for thanks to come to school on this day that something traumatic happened to you, and it was really really appreciated. So we shouldn't only celebrate the good days in our lives. As admin and principals and teachers, we should always bring forth, and also encourage, speaking about those not so good days, and just encourage teachers. Thank you for being here. Thanks for showing
Yeah,
up, and that means a whole lot to the faculty and staff.
absolutely.
And also on that point, it's up to the school too. The school system to update and upgrade the classroom libraries and the school libraries. We need books in the school that focus on mental health, that focus on anger management, that focus on conflict resolution. Those books should also be within our classroom so students can read those books and learn how to apply that knowledge in their everyday life.
Awesome, awesome.
Mhm.
Um, my final question for you, Dr. Barksdale, in this segment right here. Teachers have a lot on their plates. And one may argue, or one may say that implementing social emotional learning into into the instruction could be just one more thing that teachers have to do. Give me one practical way that teachers can embed social emotional learning into their daily classroom instruction without it feeling like one more thing being added to their plate.
That's
Give me
good.
one. This give me one practical way.
Yeah, so when I was an admin, what we did was on every Wednesday, we focus on one character trait. For an example, on every Wednesday, we focus on something like anger management. And then the Wednesday after that, we focus on conflict resolution. So every Wednesday for the first 15 minutes of school, we focus on one character trait that would better their child's social and emotional skills. So that was a really good way that we did it. Nowadays, our teachers also bogged down with state testing, where they don't have time to focus on SEL. But that's a big mistake. I think it's Frederick Douglass that said it's easier to build strong men than to. I'm sorry, it's easier to build strong boys than to repair broken men. So what we're doing, what we're seeing a lot of broken young kids not and they're being looked over for the benefit of state testing, which is really, really wrong. I agree.
Awesome.
State testing is really important, but we also need to focus on the whole child and not just the academic side of that child.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Dr. Barsdale,
Mhm.
Dr. Barsdale, and thank you for your insight on, first of all, what SEL is, and thank you for your bringing to light why it's important to have SEL implemented into our classrooms and into our schools. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, next up, we want to talk about family and community engagement. And so I want to bring up Dr. Johnson to lead us in this conversation.
Hey,
Dr. Johnson, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Awesome, awesome. Dr. Johnson, here at the foundation, our education strategy, we bring a communal aspect to the education work because we understand that in order for our students in our schools to reach their most maximum potential, is going to take not only the schools, but a community effort in order for our kids to succeed and our schools to succeed. My question to you is what role can community organizations, faith based institutions, or local businesses play in helping families overcome barriers to engagement in the education process?
Thank you. That's a good question. In terms of just speaking on behalf of the Mississippi Delta, being a mother of five who had two students to graduate from public school, I have one that's currently in public school. And I like to tell people I have them from birth to college and career. And so some of the things that I've seen, schools are tackling a lot of challenges, but community organizations, different businesses, churches, we play a vital role into shaping the future of the students as well. Some of the things that I've thought about to remove barriers and I've actually put them into work is starting a PTO. I've been very committed to not just starting a PTO at my children's school, but I've been consistent with trying to start PTOs across our district. For example, when we talk about teacher shortage, a lot of times, we say that's like one of the greatest struggles, and it is. If you look at the data, according to Mississippi Department of Education in 2024, 2025, the educational shortage showed nearly 3,000 teachers vacancies statewide and over 5,000 overall. That's major. That's major considering the amount of students that we have in public schools that's utilizing the services that we're providing. And then when you think about the rural area and the Delta schools, they bear burden with so many different gaps that's not being filled by teachers because we just don't have them. And so how can we bring in the community parents to kind of fill some of those gaps? Well, local organizations and businesses can step in by providing some type of tutoring. Like if we see an issue, how can we utilize our skill sets to benefit way? And so we had if we could strategize on providing some type of tutoring after school, during school, mentorship, or even enrichment programs to give students that experience. So we talk about exposure and experience. I don't think one can work without the other. We can provide experience without exposure, and they ain't quite got the full blown, experience of what that would look like. And so faith-based institutions, and we used to do this a lot in Delta communities, they can provide like safe spaces after school programs like literacy or different partnership workshops, collaborating with different nonprofits that's providing services that can benefit families, so that students and parents will have somewhere to go. They feel safe. Even help families with transportation to and from different locations, whether they're school events. A lot of times we don't look at, well, parents just not showing up at PTOs. Why are they not showing up? Well, we're in a rural area. We don't have public transit. And so if a parent doesn't have transportation, they have three children, and you already have the neighbor with two or three children that's coming to the PTO, how are you going to get there if you're not right around the corner from the school and it's raining? So we have to just think about all of that and not just automatically say parents just don't want to do better. They just don't care. They're not trying. And so I always try to put myself in that position because I was once a single mom. I once had some of those same barriers and those same challenges. So, and those are some of the ways that I feel like churches, businesses could benefit.
That's good. That's good. My next question, Dr. Johnson, is how can schools move beyond traditional forms of family involvement? We have parent teacher conferences and things like that, but how can we move, not exclude it, but in addition to and move beyond just your parent teacher conferences? How can we do that and to create authentic, ongoing partnerships with families?
Mm. Now, I love that one. I think we need to take a transitional approach. Like when you're talking about parent teacher conferences, yes, they do have value, but they're not enough to build long lasting, meaningful working relationships and engagement with schools. Typically, if you involve people at the beginning process, you're getting their ideas, you're including them, they feel as though they are part of something. And when a person feels like they're a part of something, they typically give it more. They give it their all. They feel needed. Who don't want to feel needed? Like, let's just be real. And so as a parent, when I'm looking at my children's test scores, or I'm looking at those attendance records, and the only thing I'm getting is a text message always telling me that my child has done something bad. And I've had this conversation with educators before. Don't come to me all the time just to tell me that my child is doing something bad. Let that conference sometime lead off with, oh my God, Derek has done such an amazing job in class. I do appreciate his presence. He's interacting, he's engaging. And I got that text message yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, thank you, Jesus, because last year was just so bad. And so we have to be able to control that balance. Because when you think about the shifts that parents take on, yes, I know teachers deal with a whole lot, but you think about what we deal with as parents. Your job is to teach. You went into this field to teach my child. My job may be something totally different, and I have to deal with all the issues that my job presents. And I still have to show up for my children, for my family. When I'm going to you, I have to be present. I have to use all my soft skills. I have to show up as this person who's understanding no matter what I have gone through for the rest of the day. And so family engagement has to be flexible, it has to be culturally responsive, and it has to be contagious. So it needs to be something that can start here and we can see it develop over a course of time and transition to the next. And so when we talk about research, because I always try to tie it back in, research shows that when families are engaged, students are twice as likely to earn a higher grade in a specific area, no matter what subject that is. And it also goes on to say that they're more likely to attend school regularly. And so we talk about that chronic absenteeism. And if you miss more than 2 days out of a month, that's considered chronic absenteeism. Well, how can we make sure children are coming to school? You work with the parents. When they come to school, they are more likely to graduate on time. So it's 24.4% of Mississippi chronic absenteeism rate. That's a lot. That's like 1 in every 4 children that's experiencing that. It's not the children's fault. We cannot punish a child for something that's an adult issue. The student has no control of when they're getting up, how they're transported back and forth to school. We have to be able to communicate and talk with our parents and understand where they are coming from and not always try to shift blame. I don't want a child coming in late for class and they're automatically sent to ISD because they're late. Why? Schools can build on this by creating parent advisory boards. That's one. Hosting curriculum nights or in community centers. Take it away from the school sometime. We don't know what trauma parents are dealing with. So everything ain't necessarily got to be held in the school. Find a community building that we can host these in. Offer workshops that explain college and career readiness, not just to the children. Yes, it's important that the children know, but how important is it for the parents to know? And not just so they can enhance their children. You have some parents that could basically really go for college. So how can we utilize those skill sets and apply to make sure that not just the child is being serviced, but the family is able to gain off of it too? And so the last thing I say, because this is a touchy one. So the same factors that accountability grades can measure, when families understand the bigger picture, they feel more invested. They would get their children to do a little bit better. Authentic partnerships with schools could really stop parents to stop seeing themselves as visitors, and they can feel as part of the process instead of co-educators, or make them co-advocates. And when families are consistent and they're consistently involved and they're at the table, not just when there's a problem, our children see the power of adults working together on their behalf. Can you imagine that unity? That's how we transform schools. That's how we transform communities from buildings of institutions and communities of success. So those are just some of my thoughts.
That's good. You mentioned something, authentic partnerships. I love that. And I'm going to tell you too, Dr. Johnson, you made me think about one of the highlights of my day when I was a classroom teacher was making those positive phone calls, and how much,
Yes.
how much that shifts challenging behavior by making those positive phone calls. And so I thank you for lifting that up.
So welcome.
So we're gonna move on to our last segment of the program. And so we're gonna bring up all three of our panelists. I'm going to ask one question. The question is going to go to each panelist, and we're going to go in the same order in which we did the first segment. And so take about 2 minutes or less. And I'm going to ask you this. So the question is, if we want every Mississippi student to thrive, what is the single most important step schools, communities, and policymakers must take together right now to raise the bar for education? We'll start with you, Dr. Hudson, and down the line.
All right. Uh, when I hear you say that, I would say the single most important thing is that we serve together. So one of my favorite quotes is by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Not everyone can be famous, but anyone can be great, because greatness is determined by service. And I think when we get people together willing to serve, we could solve these problems. There are enough people who care to, if we can get them to work together, if we can close these silos and combine our efforts, we can make a difference. And I'm going to stop right there.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Barksdale.
Yes, sir.
Question.
Really, really quickly, I think the most important thing we should focus on is the state accountability model. That's when schools are given A, B, C, D, or F based on how students perform in math or English and science. I think it's pretty one-sided and short-sighted. I think there should be an area to judge schools based off the student behavior, and the parental involvement. We need to expand the rubric for how we measure school growth. And right now, since we only measure schools off 3 subjects, all the money are going to those 3 subjects. So, and a lot of things are being overlooked, like behavior and SEL programs, and a parent conference, and PTAs. Like if a school district was measured off how many PTAs they had, I guarantee you every school inside the district will have an active and functioning PTA. But since we only measure schools based off English, math, and writing, that's where all the money going. That's what everybody's looking towards. I think we need to improve that model to include more areas, including behavior, including SEL, including parental involvement. And I believe once you do that, you will see a change overnight, because more money will flow to more things instead of just three subjects.
Awesome. Thank you. And Dr. Johnson, go ahead and round us out. Take us home.
That was probably one of the most complicated questions that has been asked, because I don't think that there's one single thing that we can do. But if I had to say one thing that I would say is primary, it would be ensuring that the people we put in positions to make these policies are for our children. And I didn't want to take it there, so I'm sorry, George. But so often our children are overlooked because we have people that's representing our children that don't look like us. They don't experience, they haven't experienced and went through the things that our children are taking on, the parents that has taken on. And so we're getting policies that's not designed nor fit to serve our children. And so when we do that, we're fighting against ourselves, because we're continuing to get things that we're having to figure things out. We're never able to have any consistency in policy. Every time we get a new administration, something else changes, whether that's on the state, federal level. And that is a barrier that our children, yet along our parents, we cannot continue to overcome. I am ready to be able to say that I don't have to shift every 4 to 8 years when it comes to the curriculum that we're using in public schools. I want to be able to say that I can send my child to any public school, regardless of where it's located, and they're going to receive a quality education. And more so, I want to be able to say that I am equipping teachers with the necessary tools and resources, with the pay that they deserve, so that we can continue, so that we can make sure we have teachers in position, enjoying doing what they do. Because if you go into teaching, you're not going for money. I'm going to point that out. You're going because you have a love of service. And so if you already have that within, if we take care of them through policy and through salary, just imagine how much our school systems will flourish across the state. So that's what I would say.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank y'all. Can we give our panelists a virtual round of applause? This was good. Awesome. So thank you all again. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, WK Kellogg and Mississippi TRHT, for making this conversation possible. But I also want to thank our panelists for your thoughtful perspectives and insight. And finally, I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for your engagement. But what's important to know is that the conversation doesn't end here. Let's carry it forward into our actions and our partnerships. And together, we can make a real difference in Mississippi. Mississippi has made some great strides educationally, but there's still some work that needs to be done. So let's make it happen. Again, thank you all so much. And this is our time. Thank you all.